Welcome to Worldview Tube's Washington Report on this December 9th, 2025. I'm joined now by my co-host, Jim Pfaff of theconservativecaucus.org or .com. Either one works, so you pick. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, good. We have Trump. I guess this released this morning. Trump did a sit-down with Politico, and the reporter is Dasha Burns. I recognize her. I've seen clips of her before. And it was pretty good. They got into a lot of different topics. We have clips of that. We have Tim Pool went on a rant about Candace Owens and just what's going on with all that. So we'll get to that as well. But let's start with a few clips of Trump in this interview with Politico. I guess we'll start with this one on Zelensky. He's talking about Zelensky and how he needs to let the people of Ukraine vote for the next president.
Is it time for Ukraine to hold an election, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a long time. It hasn't been doing particularly well. Yeah, I think it's time. I think it's an important time to hold an election. You know, they're using war not to hold an election, but I would think the Ukrainian people should have that choice, and maybe Zelensky would win. I don't know who would win, but they haven't had an election in a long time. You know, they talk about a democracy, but it gets to a point where it's not a democracy anymore.
Is it time for Ukraine to hold
All right. So he's. When was the last time Ukraine did have an election? Do you know?
Well, he got elected during Trump's first term. Mm-hmm. I think that was 2018, maybe, if I remember correctly. But they haven't had an election since.
Yeah, and he's been using.
What's interesting? What's interesting to me is there are so many people that are pro-Ukraine that talk about democracy and talk about, the very evil thing that Vladimir Putin did. It was absolutely evil. But none of them talk about this election situation. Mm. And here we were in 1864 in the middle of a civil war, and Abraham Lincoln had an election. And he could have bypassed it. He had suspended habeas corpus. He had done a few things to allow him to have the kind of power that he felt he needed. And we can have arguments about that one way or the other. And in fact, the people, there are a lot of people who are very negative on Lincoln for being authoritarian in certain areas. And I'm not quite as negative, but I hear the arguments. But he had an election right in the middle of a war. So I think it's absurd that Zelensky hadn't had to face his people during a wartime situation. The only time you want to do that is to hold on to power. And it only feeds the narrative that potentially there's hundreds of billions of dollars that have been funneled into that country, not just from us through the Biden administration, but European countries. And it's going to political benefactors. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case at all. There needs to be an election. It's not a Democratic system there right now. Democratic system right there.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that all the people who scream about Trump being a dictator and want to be a dictator are the people who love Zelensky. And when he comes to America, and especially, some of the people in Congress who are so against Trump and call him a dictator, they roll out the red carpet for Zelensky.
Well,
it's
listen,
kind of a double standard there, huh?
The whole Trump dictator narrative, everyone who says that exposes themselves of accepting the dictatorial efforts, the efforts to consolidate power in Washington, D.C. amongst Joe Biden, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, even to a certain extent Bill Clinton, although he wasn't even nearly as bad as the people this century. Donald Trump's been anti-authoritarian. And there have been some things that I've disagreed with here and there, but they're just along the lines of what the decisions presidents make. Donald Trump is an American. He believes in America. He believes in the American people more than Washington, D.C. And whatever criticism you want to bring out, authoritarianism ain't one of them. And you're never going to convince anybody except the most radical political opponents that that's what's happening, because it's not.
Yeah. Well, they got into another topic, Venezuela. And she asked him about Maduro, and he is standing by where him saying that Maduro's days are numbered. Watch this.
Your impact does stretch far beyond Europe. I want to talk about another area where you're making your mark, which is in Venezuela. You've said that Nicolas Maduro's days are numbered and that the U.S. could soon strike Venezuelan territory. Could we see American troops on the ground in Venezuela?
I don't comment on that. I wouldn't say that one way or the other. I can say this, that he sent us millions of people, many from prisons, many drug dealers and drug lords, and mental institution, people in mental institutions. He sent them into our country where we had a very stupid president. You know that. Biden's a low IQ person, especially nowadays. I mean, he was low IQ 30 years ago, but he was especially low IQ now. And what he did to our country is not good. Tren de Aragua, the gangs, one of the meanest gangs in the world.
You've locked down the border now.
No, he sent a lot of these people. He also sends in a lot of drugs. So we'll see how it all works out.
So
But I can't talk about
So
strategy.
how far would you go to take Maduro out of office?
I don't want to say that,
But you want to see him out?
his days are numbered.
Can you rule out an American ground invasion?
I don't want to rule in or out. I don't talk about it. Why would I talk to you, an extremely unfriendly publication, if you want to call it Politico, that got $8 million from Obama to keep it afloat? Why would I do that? Why would I talk about that to Politico? I mean, I'm doing this because you picked me as a man
Well,
for
I'm
Europe, and I
asking
thought it was
for
appropriate
transparency
thing to do.
for their American people, because a lot of folks are.
Transparency.
Well,
I love how he responds. I mean, I think Donald Trump really does get where the real problems are in this country. As I've said a few times on this show, and I'll repeat it, you know, in 2016, when he was running, I told people, particularly Cruz supporters who were so upset with Donald Trump, I said, listen, guys, you don't understand. If this guy can become president, he's going to turn over all the trash cans in Washington, D.C. and expose what's really going on. That retort to the Political reporter is one of the myriad of ways that he does that every day. We should be very thankful for him having exposed this. Frankly, I would hope someday that Republicans would understand that he is exposing the problems. And we need to, now to the Maduro thing, you cannot have a military incursion into another country without a declaration of war by Congress. That's just the constitutional provision. I have no problem, though, with him leaving that threat out there. And I do believe Maduro's days are numbered. But there are some huge risks in our hemisphere here that we need to be willing to work against. We have huge threats in Brazil, where you've got a government there that is a real problem. Donald Trump has spoken in kind terms about that government, but he knows the threat that Brazil is. Venezuela is a huge threat, too. They have done a lot to harm this country, to hurt us, to throw us into chaos. And a good portion of the crime that illegals have committed in this country are coming from Venezuelan Tren de Aragua members who not only came here on their own and created their own crime, but also through many years, mostly through the Biden administration, they were recruiting people to help them expand that crime. It is a massive incursion on our country. It is a war act, what Nicolas Maduro has done to our country, both through the drugs and Tren de Aragua. He did it. It's a war action, and we need to treat it seriously, and I'm glad Donald Trump is.
Yep. Well, let's keep moving on with this interview. We have multiple clips. He then got into Europe, and I have a couple clips of him talking about Europe and how Europe is basically fallen, and some of these countries, the demographic shifts, and he's saying we may need to rethink our alliances. Watch this.
Is the immigration, because he allows nobody in his country. And Poland has done a very good job in that respect, too. But most European nations, they're decaying. They're decaying.
you can imagine some leaders in Europe are a little freaked out by what your posture is, and European.
No, they should be freaked out by what they're doing to their countries. They're destroying their countries.
Well, European Council President.
And they're people I like. Look, they're people I like. I get along with them. You know that. But they can't let this happen. And it gets to a point where you can't really correct it. There'll be a point, and it's very close to that
And
point.
what will that mean?
It will mean that they're no longer going to be strong nations.
Does that mean they won't be allies
Or
anymore?
they'll be, well, it depends, it depends. They'll change their ideology, obviously, because the people coming in have a totally different ideology. But it's going to make them much weaker. They'll be much weaker, and they'll be much different.
And what will that mean for our relationship
look at
with
your mayor
them?
of London. He's a disaster. He's a disaster. He's got a totally different ideology of what he's supposed to have. And he gets elected because so many people have come in and they vote for him now because, it's like, it's one of those things. But I hate what's happened to London, and I hate what's happened to Paris. I hate when I see it.
Sir, it's sometimes hard to tell when you say these things. Do you intend to send kind of a message of tough love to our allies to push them to make reforms? Or do you think that many of them are just weak and you don't really want to be allies with them?
I think they're weak, but I also think that they want to be so politically correct. I think they don't know what to do. Europe doesn't know what to do. They don't know what to do on trade either. I mean, I look at a lot of the trade, situation that's going on over there. It's a little bit dangerous, but Europe, they want to be politically correct, and it makes them weak. That's what makes them weak.
It sounds like you want to see some pretty massive changes.
Well, I think they should get the people out that came into the country illegally.
I want to ask about NATO.
If you take a look at Sweden, so Sweden was known as the safest country in Europe, one of the safest countries in the world. Now it's known as a very unsafe, pretty unsafe country. It's not even believable. It's a whole different country, Sweden.
All right. And yeah, we've seen stuff coming out of Europe of the immigration and how it's been affecting them. And not just that, the censorship coming out of the EU is insane. We just had that football player who just got sentenced for saying something on his podcast or saying something on social media. And he got sentenced, I think, up to 10 months with 200 hours of unpaid work for a social media post.
Yeah, censorship is rampant. The reason that they're censoring is because, in large part, because of this policy of forced immigration. The EU Commission took a vote, which is just dominated by radical leftists primarily, took a vote that EU nations have to accept immigration or else they can't stay in the EU. So they're using an economic threat against them. Listen, I think that Donald Trump's stance towards Europe has been the right one. If Europe is not going to maintain Western values, which it isn't at present, then we need to reject that. And they're paying a price economically. They have not had the economic growth that was projected, 20, 30 years ago when the EU really started to form the economic aspect of its connection, and evidenced by the fact that Great Britain pulled away out of frustration. 2 generations before Charlemagne, and we're talking the 9th century AD, Arabs were in Spain mostly, and a little bit in Italy, attempting to take over Europe by force. Charles Martel, the predecessor to Charlemagne, and his grandfather actually, pushed back the Muslim incursion into the areas of France. And Europe would have gone to a Muslim status, just like in the rest of the Ottoman Empire. I mean, Asia Minor was a strongly Christian area for much of its history after the Roman Empire. Same with Northern Africa. I mean, you go into Northern Africa today, it's Muslim. The Muslim incursion in the Mediterranean region was about to take over the entire Mediterranean until Charles Martel pushed back the Muslim invaders in Spain and eventually pushed them off of the continent of Europe. Now that incursion's happening with the blessing of European leaders in a non-violent manner or non-directly violent manner, bringing some violence in because rapes are crazy in Europe. So anyway, Donald Trump's stance is correct. And European leaders need to be on alert. We're not going to put up with them taking away Western freedoms from Europeans.
Yep. We have some more clips, and then we'll move on to the Tim Pool clip after that. But we got to go to a break, and we'll be back here in just a moment.
We have a big announcement, folks. It's called Bella Melt. In the first week, you lost 3 pounds on this, right?
That is correct.
Your GLP-1 is a natural hormone that's in every single one of our bodies. And your GLP-1 lets you know if you're full. It's a satiety hormone. So when your GLP is working properly, it does help suppress your appetite as well as reduce those cravings. So what it's going to do best is it's going to reduce your sugar cravings or any other cravings you have in your body. It's going to suppress that appetite. But where Melissa got the most benefit, I think, over the last week was the L-carnitine. The L-carnitine tells your mitochondria, this is where you make, we talked about it before, this is where you produce energy in your cells. It actually tells those mitochondria to burn fat for fuel.
MelissaHouseBG.com just now introducing for the first time Bella Melt with GLP-1 fast action.
All right, welcome back from the break. Jim, I have some clips of him talking about birthright citizenship and more, but I want to play one more clip on Europe just because I have to play it. Watch this.
So how involved are you going to get? I mean, could we see you getting involved in European
I want to
elections,
run the
for
United
example?
States. I don't want to run Europe. I'm involved in Europe very much.
Might you endorse
NATO
candidates?
calls me daddy. I mean, I have a lot to say about it. Look, I raised, the GDP from 2% to 5%. The 2% they weren't paying and the 5% they are paying. And they're paying it because when we send things over, NATO pays for it, and I assume they give it to Ukraine. But Europe is being destroyed.
So how
NATO calls me daddy. So there you go.
And and of right they ought to.
Yeah.
Europe would be in a much worse situation if Donald Trump hadn't become president in 2016. Very seriously. In fact, they would not have been ready for what happened with Ukraine even if Putin's ambitions are to move further into Europe, which it may be, they wouldn't have been able to stop it both in Ukraine and elsewhere if Donald Trump hadn't come on the scene. If Hillary Clinton had become president in 2016, Ukraine would have been entirely overrun by Russia, and you wouldn't have Europe the way it is right now. So, yes, they should call him daddy because he saved them from themselves. But I am glad that he has this focus of wanting to affect what's happening here in this country. A strong America will keep the world safer. Not because of military might, but because of the inspiration of what the American ideal brings, and because of the economic prosperity that would bring if we can reinstitutionalize the American dream away from this centralized government crap that Donald Trump is beginning to tear down.
Yep. And moving on to more domestic issues, they talked about birthright citizenship, which isn't the Supreme Court supposed to be hearing arguments on this, right?
Yep. They're going to rule on it soon.
Yeah. Well, here he is. I'll just let him say it.
The case is very interesting because that case was meant for the babies of slaves. And if you look at the dates on the case, it was exactly having to do with the Civil War. That case was not meant for some rich person coming from another country, putting a foot in our country, and all of a sudden their whole family becomes, United States citizens. That case is all about slaves, the babies of slaves, and it was a good reason for doing it, and that's all it was about. And people now are understanding it. It's been explained to them, and I think the court understands it too. That would be a devastating decision if we lose that case.
That court, you've put
because our country cannot afford to house tens of millions of people that came in through birthright citizenship. When that happened, that was meant for the babies of slaves. And if you look at the exact dates that it was passed, it all had to do with the Civil War and the ending of the Civil War. It's that little period of time, and people now are starting to understand.
All right. And that happens. I mean, I know someone who lives in Miami, and they talk about how all these Russian girls who their dads, are rich over there in Russia, and they send them to America to go find a man, get married, have a kid, and get U.S. citizenship.
There's no doubt there's been a scam of it for a long period of time. I think initially people were open to allowing birthright citizenship on the basis of the 14th Amendment because there was a time that you had people immigrating into this country legally who became radicalized Americans. Okay. They were radical American patriots. They became that way because they wanted the American ideal to be real. But that's not what's happening right now. Donald Trump's right to push back on this. And yes, listen, if you do a search on the internet, you're going to hear a myriad of arguments trying to claim that the 14th Amendment was not specifically intended to deal with the babies born of slaves, but it was. If you are willing to read it closely and pay close attention to what's being said there, not to mention the fact that there are many people who were promoting the bill, saying, standing with this ideal, it was meant to make sure that Democrats, particularly in the South, or any politician anywhere, would deny citizenship of slaves who were brought in to the United States involuntarily and made to live under slavery involuntarily up until the 14th Amendment was passed. So it's very clear it was meant to protect black former slaves and their children moving forward from the Civil War. He's right about it. We do need this needs to be shut down. There's no doubt about it, because it is what you call in the insurance industry or anywhere else, a moral hazard. And that moral hazard has been playing out exactly as you've talked about, Logan. There are people paying money to do this, and it's an absurd craziness.
Yeah, and I said they get married, but some of them, they get married there.
No, they don't. They don't often
but a lot
get
of them,
married.
They don't get married. They just have kids, and then so that their kid can be a U.S. citizen, and then them as well.
Oh yeah. And by the way, and it's a sex trafficking. It's one aspect of sex trafficking. To be candid.
Yeah, it really is. Well, they also got into one last clip from this interview, and then we'll move on to Candace Owens and Tim Pool. They got into immigration as well, same topic, but they got into the Somalian issue. Here we go.
Contribute. I want to see people that contribute. I don't want to see Somalia. I don't want to see a woman that marries her brother to get in and then becomes a congressman, does nothing but complain. All she does is complain, and yet her country's a mess. It's one of the worst in the world. Let her go back, fix up her own country. Somalia, and I was right about it. I started complaining about Somalia long before the scandal. The horrible things they're doing to Minnesota, it's incredible. They have an incompetent governor there, too. The Democrats are running some bad ships. I want to see people that contribute.
And I think everyone knows who he's referring to, Ilhan Omar.
Oh, yeah, Ilhan Omar. She's not an American. She has obtained citizenship along the way. That does not make her an American. It may make her a citizen, but not an American.
She's openly allegiant to Somalia over the U.S. Absolutely. She's a liar. She lied in her immigration process. There could be an argument of taking that citizenship away, frankly. I don't know how solid that is. I'm not an expert in that area. But I can tell you this, even if she maintains citizenship, the woman's not an American. Most Democrat politicians are not Americans. I'm just going to say it outright, because they don't promote anything that has to do with this country. It's one thing to have political disagreements and have different strategies about how we work under this constitutional republic. Democrats are not attempting to work under this. Democrat politicians are not attempting to work under this constitutional republic. They would push the Constitution aside if they could. They do every day in their legislative attempts and everything else that they do. When they obtain the presidency, whatever, they're constantly tearing down this country. Ilhan Omar is just the worst example of that. There are a lot of Democrat politicians who were born and raised in this country who are un-American. She epitomizes their worst instincts, having not
grown up as an American and pledging allegiance to foreign countries. I think it's an absurd, it is a violation, by the way. Whenever she says such statements, that's a direct violation of her oath of office. Every politician in this country is supposed to take an oath of office pledging allegiance to this Constitution. If you're pledging allegiance anywhere else, you violated your oath. And in my opinion, you should be immediately removed from office. I mean, we need to be serious about this because we need this constitutional republic to stand. And it cannot with people like her and most Democrat politicians who have no care or concern for this country or our Constitution.
Yep. All right. Well, let's move on. I lost the exact clip I had of Tim Pool, but hopefully I found the right one. His house got shot up. His studio and compound in Virginia. Someone drove by and West Virginia, and shot rounds into his home, and he's fed up, and he's going after Candace pretty hard. Rightfully so, but I'll just let him talk. Watch this.
Candace Owens is a evil scumbag. She is a degenerate. She is burning everything down, and she's gloating and smiling while she does it. And you know what you told me? She has no security. She doesn't deal with we have to deal with. She's a piece of She's making everyone else suffer, and all of these conservatives out there that send me these messages have no to call her out. More and more people have started doing it. They send me these messages. Good for you, Tim. Good for you, Tim. I wasn't the first person to do it. I'm not going to take credit for that. But don't DM me like I did something for you as you cower, scared that she'll put you on her thumbnail and claim you benefited from Charlie Kirk's assassination, which he's doing to me right now.
Yeah, that was the...
I'm done with these people.
She has security, just not on the level of you.
Oh, yeah, the one fat guy you mentioned with no wall and no barrier in a suburban neighborhood with neighbors. She doesn't give two no one's out for her. She's lying about all of this. You told me you went to her house and she's got a 4-foot wall and one fat guy, and she doesn't give about her security. Meanwhile, I get bullets fired at my property, and I have to go live in the middle of nowhere. And I got strangers coming up to my house in Maryland, breaking in. I got people showing up and beating up the residents who try to live there. How the am I even supposed to sell this property? And you know, it's all lies. It's all hypocrisy, and it is for the purpose of making money. And she does not live the way other people live. And she claims she liked Charlie, she loved Charlie, and she is burning everything down that he built because she is evil. She is evil. And I'll say it again: this conservative movement is fractured, it's fried, whatever it is. Okay, Republicans are on track to lose the midterms. They were actually trending the other direction until Charlie Kirk was murdered.
Yeah.
And this is the point, isn't it? The most effective political assassination in history. And thanks to the likes of the vile Candace Owens, she has turned Turning Point into the perpetrators of the crime that was against them.
All right, Jim. Sorry to do this, but you got 1 minute.
Expletive laden. You can push that back if you want. The reality is Tim Pool's right. I've been to his place. I've been on his program. That was a premeditated attack to try to murder people there. This is an outrage. And Candace Owens, she is evil. She's just flat out evil. And she is trying to destroy this movement. And it's crazy. So I'm with Tim Pool on this. I think he's absolutely right.
Yeah. And I mean, there was a lot of swearing in there. We cut it out, but he is very upset. He has people coming after him. And I think the reason he's so upset about Candace is she's coming after him after all this, correct?
Well, listen, Tim Pool's a patriot. Let's just get past the language for a minute. If you're a Christian and you don't like it or whatever, I don't care what you think. Tim Pool is a patriot. He does believe in what this country is about. Candace Owens does not believe what this country is about. She does believe in generating revenue for the things that she does, and that's why she promotes the evil stuff that she does.
Yeah, it's all about money.
It is money, absolutely.
Yep. All right. Well, we're all out of time for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Go to theconservativecaucus.org or .com and watch us every day at 6:30 p.m. Central Time at worldviewtube.com. Till then, take care.
Tonight on the Worldview Report, Congress is using its annual defense bill to force the Pentagon into turning over videos of missile strikes. against suspected drug smuggling boats off the coast of Latin America. The CEO of America's second largest bank is pushing back against allegations that the bank is debanking customers based on their political views. Another grisly discovery in Nigeria, while it points to increased targeting of Christians as we head into the Christmas season. And the Trump administration is cracking down on billions in refugee fraud in Minnesota that has been stolen using taxpayer money for years. And the World Health Organization is proposing a globally digital identity infrastructure that permanently tracks every individual's vaccination status from birth. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. Leading off tonight, Politico is reporting that Congress is using its annual defense bill to force the Pentagon into turning over videos of missile strikes against suspected drug smuggling boats off the coast of Latin America. Lawmakers, they're planning to withhold a quarter of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's travel budget until the Pentagon provides them with the full, unedited videos. The demand, quietly, by the way, tucked into the final draft of the annual defense policy